Okay, it is 12 noon, October 3rd, 2022. I'd like to call the assembly meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay.
Here.
Bob.
Here.
Mark.
Here.
David.
Here.
Thomas. Chelsea.
Here.
Jeff.
Here. Okay, we have a full assembly today. It's now time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance.
Stands.
Okay, today we have a mayoral proclamation on Domestic Violence Awareness Month and the Borough of Petersburg, in recognition of the critical work being done by domestic violence victim advocates and allies, encourages all citizens to actively engage in the scheduled Domestic Violence Awareness Month activities in October, organized by Working Against Violence for Everyone, WAVE, and other national organizations working towards the eradication of domestic violence. Oh, excuse me. Was it not working? Should I repeat it or? Okay, so wherever I was here. In 2021, WAVE provided 258 services to people impacted by gender-based violence in Petersburg. While the impact of domestic violence is felt by individuals and families, it also affects their communities and nation as a whole. Petersburg joins with others across the state of Alaska and nationwide in supporting domestic violence victims and survivors, the advocates and organizations who serve them, and holding offenders accountable in the Petersburg Borough. Therefore, I, Mark Jensen, Mayor of the Petersburg Borough, hereby proclaim October 2022 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and October 20th, 2022 as Wear Purple Thursday. So with that being said, we'll go on to the next item, 4. Entertain a motion. Oh, there are no minutes available today for us to approve. So that moves us to item 5, excuse me, amendment and approval of this meeting agenda.
I'd move to approve the meeting agenda as is.
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor of moving forward with what's presented to us today, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearings. Today we have one public hearing. Excuse me, I'm a little scratchy today. This is a public hearing for ordinance 2022-14. This is an ordinance updating the Borough Code to provide for elderly housing and assisted living directors at Mountain View Manor. Any public testimony regarding this ordinance should be given during this public hearing. Copy of the ordinance 2022-14 may be found under agenda item 15A. Is there anyone in the audience or zooming in, Clerk Thompson?
There's not.
Okay, that public hearing is now closed. There are no bid awards today. That brings us to item 8, persons to be heard related to items on today's agenda. I don't see anyone in the audience that's interested, and once again, no one has called in or zoomed in.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 9, persons to be heard unrelated to items on today's agenda. And once again, there's no one in the audience, and I don't think anybody's called in. So we'll move on to 10, boards, commission, and committee reports. There are none. Item 11, consent agenda, no items there. Report of other officers. We have Petersburg Medical Center CEO Phil Hofstetter with us today, and he will give us an update.
Yep. Good afternoon, Phil Hofstetter, Petersburg Medical Center CEO. I have just 4 items for you today. So the first is last week at our board meeting, we approved the final selection for our RFP for architects and engineering for the new facility, and that will be to enter into negotiations with Bettersworth North. They're a well-established architectural firm. This was selected through a scoring process with the facility, with appropriate representation within our facility. So we're very excited about moving forward with that. And we also, in the same vein of thought, we received the final RESPEC work for the dig up there that occurred on those Excel and behind the Manor sites as well. And so it's looking like roughly in the site directly behind the Manor would be somewhere in order of 8 feet to 12 feet of muskeg. The lower muskeg amounts are in sort of the ravines of the creek. So so it looks like that's kind of what we're working with, and more information to come on that. The second thing third thing is the vaccine pod. I just want to huge shout out to our public health nurse, our PMC staff, the Parks and Rec, and volunteers that made that vaccine clinic or vaccine pod successful. So we had over 300 people come in from the community, and it was very very well. So huge compliment to those folks working there. November 10th, we're putting our board work session together for strategic plan for the next 5 years. So we're in our 5th year for our strategic plan, and it's good timing to kind of revisit that, and we will hold that on November 10th. We're going to do a lot of work with the managers on October 19th for the retreat to kind of talk through the last couple of years with COVID, new facility, and revitalizing the strategic plan so we can set the stage for the next 5 years. So that is occurring, and that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hofstadter. Any questions of Mr. Hofstadter today? Seeing none, thank you. Yep. That brings us to the second report today, and that is from Assembly Member Lim on issues at SEPA.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's going to be a fairly short report. Meeting was about 4 hours, which is great. First off, the reservoirs, if you can believe it, are totally, and unfortunately, we're spilling a little bit. The staff has been trying to push the electricity back and forth so we could prevent spilling, and I think they've done a pretty credible job of doing that, and they will continue to do it over the STI, over the line between Tyee and Swan. So that looks pretty good. There was quite a discussion on looking at what's going to happen this winter, and long and the short of all that discussion is they're calling for a colder, wetter winter. So whatever that means, go with it. So we'll, and then we had an executive session on new facilities, talking about new facilities. Unfortunately, I'm not at a point I can talk about any of it, but the idea behind it being is that, and we have ideas of where, how, when, but the where, how, the how and the when is a real question. You're talking about $100 million to build a new facility if you were putting in a new hydro, plus or minus. And so the question is, do you bring one online, and when do you do that? And whatever you're looking at 10 to 12 years down the road before you, from start to finish, at least. So the board, and after a long discussion, the board has approved what I'll call a power usage study, looking out over the next 10 to 20 years at what we expect here in Southeast in terms of power usage. Is it going to go up? Is it going to stay stable? And then whereabouts is that going to occur? And we here in Petersburg are, surprisingly enough, even though our population's stable, we're about increasing at about a 3.7% a year of our power usage. So our usage itself just going up as it is, as an indicator. So, and that information is supposed to come back. It'll probably won't be back till next spring sometime or thereabouts till we get that to begin to look at it from the Southeast standpoint of what the needs are. And then the last item I have is that the board approved the bond that covered our cable lay buildings and some other things we had in there. So the rates weren't quite as low as what we'd like, but they were considerably well down. And I can't remember offhand. Unfortunately, I lost my note on it. It was like 4% annual, and it was still pretty doggone good at bonding. And that's all I've got for now. It was a good meeting.
Thank you, Member Len. Any questions on the Bob on SEPA? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Bob, you mentioned about the $100 million for a new facility. Have they decided if they're looking at a north end new facility or south end new facility?
The answer is, looking both places. And that's more to be determined, let's say, next spring, we'll have it I think it'll be pretty well public pinned down.
Okay, thank you for that report. That brings us to the mayor's report. One item there today. Tomorrow, October 4th, the 2022 municipal elections take place. The polls will be open tomorrow in the activity room of the community center from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. For more information regarding the election, check out the 2022 election page of the borough's website or contact Clerk Thompson at 907-772-5405 or dthompson@petersburgak.gov. A link to the election page is attached to this report. October 4th, 2022 borough election at the Petersburg, Alaska website, petersburgak.gov. So that brings us to the manager's report.
Thank you, sir. Public Library's passport service is suspended indefinitely due to some unforeseen circumstances. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. The ice skate pond lighting project is underway and the area will be ready for upcoming winter ice skating. And thank you to Fred Haltener, Petersburg Municipal Power and Light, Cameco, and Mattingly Electric for all the work and donated money, time, and materials. Parks and Rec received state grant funding to add more lights around the ball field, which will happen in the next few years. Parks and Rec is working with Petersburg Little League and the Petersburg School District for designs and placement. The annual Halloween Hustle will be hosted by Parks and Rec on Monday, October 31st from 4 to 6. Great volunteer opportunity. Contact Julie Anderson at the Community Center if you're interested. We continue to have some deferred maintenance work needed at the Community Center. The electrical boiler room work will be happening in mid-October. We're contacting plumbing contractor to discuss a leak in the boiler room above one of the heat exchangers, and the staff is working to develop a plan for the needed sewer line repairs. Water staff is starting to winterize various air relief valves and other equipment, and the tub grinder that was purchased is in Petersburg. It's been set up by the wastewater plant. Staff is evaluating whether additional parts and pieces will be needed to produce the right size of wood chips for the composting system, but are happy with the condition of the grinder and know it will help our process dramatically. McMillan Jacobs has the Blind Slough project available for download by interested contractors. The bid documents are being posted on the Alaskan Plans Room for any interested contractor to review. There's been quite a bit of interest in a short amount of time. The site visit for prospective bidders is scheduled for October 24th and 25th, with the bid opening scheduled for November 28th at 4 p.m. Power and Light staff will be checking street lights prior to Halloween. If citizens know of a street light that is not working properly, please contact Power and Light at 907-772-4203 to report it for repairs. Window replacement phase 1 in the elderly housing dining room has been completed and looks great. And we are working through numerous steps to set up the elderly housing and assisted living as separate entities and processing paperwork to reflect the changes in administration with various state and federal agencies. Michelle continues to help assisted living as we work through the transition to Derek at assisted living. And please remember to call the harbor office with boat watching information. Harbor staff is touching base with owners with vessels of concern, reminding owners to prep their boats for winter and snow freezing issues. Sergeant Aris, conducted ALICE training for the high school and middle school staff, along with separate ALICE training for the elementary school staff. Feedback received from the training has been great. Officers Pop and Wolf attended the additional training for tactical responses. The course was comprised of 16 students from many agencies. At the end of the course, Officer Pop took #1 top shot and Officer Wolf placed #2 in the class. Congratulations to Officers Pop and Wolf for placing 1 and 2 in the course and representing Petersburg Police Department at the highest professional level possible. Community Development Department is continuing to clear out residential planning, building plans from past projects. Homeowners will receive a letter explaining where to pick up their house plans. We'd appreciate it if homeowners would let us know if they do not want their plans back so we can dispose of them. Ray completed the asbestos abatement training class. The information will be helpful to property owners and contractors during building repair and renovation projects. Assisted Living finished the last of the preparation for a room showing this past Wednesday. And we were attempting to fix the old dishwasher up there and put it back in service so the current unit can be taken out of service and hopefully repaired. Motor pool continues to get the fleet prepped for winter. And we sent one of our mechanics to Anchorage last week for fire equipment pump service training. Sanitation is advertising to fill a sanitation operator position after a recent staff resignation. And we have started to see some garbage bears at it again, and had some raiding incidents over this past week. We encourage anyone who's still having bear issues to contact Public Works so we can discuss how best to handle the problem. Keeping garbage well secured and as far removed from bears as possible is the best way to minimize the potential for trouble. We have one maintenance technician up at the Manor helping with some space renovation and another completing some siding installation on the equipment shed and planning for replacement of the wastewater parts storage shed. The application for the Papke's property acquisition has been sent to DNR and copied to DOT. They're asking for some details regarding conceptual plans that may require further changes. I'm reviewing their requests with Horion Associates. Property taxes are due by October 17th at 4:30 in the finance office. They can be paid online, by mail, or in person. And our contract property assessors are in town and will be back the week of October 10th if anyone would like to meet with them. And that's it, unless there's questions.
Any question of the manager on any of his report? I have one question, Steve, about the passports. Is there anywhere in town to get passports then?
No,
There
no.
isn't. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, so at this point, someone would have to go to Juneau or Wrangell to get passport services.
Any idea when we will be able to
It's
provide
a
that?
medical issue, and so no, I don't know the answer.
All right, thanks.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, that brings us to item 15A, and this is ordinance 2022-12. It's in its third and final reading. And am I on the right track here, Deb?
Yes,
Got
you
a
are.
new format here on my iPad today, so bear with me. So anyway, this is the third reading for ordinance 2022-12. And this ordinance entitled Safety Code Adoptions and Title 19 of the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled Zoning to address tiny house dwellings, detached accessory dwellings, and multiple buildings on a single lot. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its third and final reading.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Fine Walsh. Discussion. Clerk call the roll. Oh, you have, oh, okay, sorry, Jay.
I didn't want to step on. Yeah, just, I know it's the third reading and we've spoken about this at length. I just wanted to briefly touch base on it in case someone is tuning in for the first time. I think this is one small part of us addressing the housing issue in Petersburg. Just a small part of it. This issue goes back to around 2018. We were looking at some code revisions. I think it's great. I'll be voting for it. As Director Cabrera spoke at length during the last meeting, there's some pretty rigid standards of what this needs to be so that it can maintain quality of housing we have here in Petersburg. I think it serves multiple purposes, from potentially short-term rentals to the quote-unquote mill apartments. Just one more piece of the puzzle here, and I'm glad we're finally moving forward with this. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea,
yes,
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes,
David,
Yes. Okay, ordinance 2022-12 passes unanimously in its third and final reading. That brings us to ordinance 2022-14. This is an ordinance updating the Borough Code to provide for elderly housing and assisted living directors at Mountain View Manor. This is the second reading, like I said. Adoption of this ordinance in 3 readings will create separate director positions for the Mountain View Manor Assisted Living and Elderly Housing Facilities. The Assembly unanimously approved ordinance 2022-14 in its first reading. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its second reading.
So moved.
second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Lim. Any discussion on this ordinance? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes,
Jeff,
Yes.
Jay, Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea.
yes,
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2022-14 passes unanimously in its second reading. That brings us to item 16 on today's agenda, new business. First item there is ordinance 2022. Did I miss one?
Mountain View Manor living one?
That was 2214. Are you looking at an old agenda where 13 was still on there? Yeah.
Sorry, missed it.
Yeah, well, I
Sorry.
could have missed something because like I said, it's a new format. and it's
Thank you, Jay.
Gonna be handy, but
I missed it. That's on
okay.
me.
Back to new business. Item A, ordinance 2022-15, an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2023 budget for known changes. There are many items listed here, but I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Stanton Gregor, seconded by member Bucci. Discussion. And how, first of all, how do we want to go about this? There is 16 items here. Some of them are just approving pass-through money from the state, and some of them are adjusting the budget for for reasons. I would want to address them individually. Member Stanton Gregor.
Yeah, I was thinking about that same thing, Mr. Mayor. I mean, obviously it's at the will of the assembly. My initial inclination, and either you or the clerk line me out if I'm missing, is if anyone has any, like, take it as a body, and if there's any amendments to be made to see if they stand on their own, like, as all 16 of these things, and if somebody wants to add or amend one of the numbers, or maybe take it individually, and that way, I don't know, does that work for you, clerk? It seems cleaner that way.
I would agree.
It would be probably a quicker process as well. So if any assembly members want to amend this ordinance as presented to us, item by item, please make a motion. Member Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to amend the general fund, I guess, increase for small tools and equipment for the police department vehicle cameras to the done in 5 annual installments. Is that a good enough motion?
I think that's descriptive enough. And just for keeping track, if there's any other motions per person mentioned by line item, that'd be good. So I think we're all on the same page, right? We're talking about the car cameras.
Item 12, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to, and it was listed in here, to change instead of one payment to do it in 5 years. Is that what it is? Let me look. So discussion on that. Member Bucci.
Yeah, thank you. I guess just a question for the borough managers. So how is the supplemental budget put together? Do department heads request this to be put on, or how is this process? How does the supplemental come in after we've approved a budget in June or July?
Mayor. So at various times throughout the year, after our finance director hears from department heads directly, she'll put forward that she's ready to do a supplemental budget. Then we ask the department heads for all the details, like you see in this thing. She pulls it all together and it comes in front of the assembly for approval. It's not implemented until the assembly votes and approves it. It takes 3 readings, including a public hearing.
Yep.
Okay, remember Stanton Gregor.
Yeah, my comment is specific to the amendment. That's the part we're on. It's slightly more broad also, is I'll be hard pressed to vote for any amendments in the first reading, given there's so many pieces on there, and this is a 6-week process, the next meeting being a public hearing. I would feel more comfortable just for myself. Waiting until after the public gets a chance to weigh in on this before I consider making any significant changes to it. So I'll be voting no on the amendment.
Any other discussion? Member Fine Walsh.
Yeah, I'll be voting no on the amendment as well. And I guess kind of along the lines of my comments during our last meeting, I would prefer to see an amendment where item 12 was just struck from this. Seems to me like this is something that could be put in the police department budget next budgeting session, and we just handle it then. I don't really see the need to split it into multiple payments or something like that. I believe, doesn't sound like these these cameras have suddenly gone on the fritz between when the budget was passed and now. So I don't really understand why they're in the supplemental budget at all. But like I said, I'm kind of of the same mind as Jay here that, you know, we should, we're going to do 3 readings, so can deal with these over time.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment, member?
Yes, well, I'm not opposed to these, and I had wished that it would have been handled during the regular budget process. Most of the other lines have quite a bit of verbiage associated with them that we received in the packet. I still have some questions about the vehicle cameras. And I'd like to see, before I could support in the next reading, I'd like to see several things done. Like, how many cameras do we need? I believe this calls for 6 cameras. How many cameras do we need to have per vehicle? Are these cameras reusable? In other words, we're also talking about this, about purchasing a new vehicle. Are they easily changed from one police car to another police car? Can Public Works, can they accomplish that? Another question I have is, and I believe it was addressed at our last meeting, this includes any upgrades to these cameras. How long will the system last? Is it something that's constantly upgraded? I know we currently have cameras, but they're kind of funky and not working in the current cars. Had we looked at any other systems? Have we gone out to bid from any other vendors? So if we could receive a report similar to what we received on the other items in the packet, explaining the costs and the breakdown and some of these questions, I would be inclined to support it if I had those questions answered.
Well, with that being said, does the chief have an answer to those questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Would you want the chief?
I would really like to see it in writing for the meeting, if that's possible.
Okay, member Lynn.
Yes, I agree with Member Kensinger. We had a 6-0 vote on this last time, and it appears back on the agenda again. And no reach out for a lot of the questions that Member Kensinger had. And I would add to his list, you know, what about interference with existing systems? Has that been tested? What about the situation where we have that downloaded into our system? Is it compatible with what we have, or is there interference? How does that affect, you know, what our existing system does in our records? None of these questions, there was some discussion last time, but none of these questions are answered. And I totally agree with Member Kensinger on that.
Okay, so we're on the amendment to make this in 5-year payments. Is that what it is?
Mhm.
And so that's what the vote will be. Is there any other discussion on that amendment? Clerk, call a roll on the amendment.
Jeff,
No.
Bob,
No,
David,
No.
Chelsea,
No.
Thomas,
No.
Mark,
No.
Jay,
Nope.
Okay, so that amendment fails with a unanimous vote. So that brings us back to all 16 items in the first reading for the supplemental budget. So any discussion on that? Member Stanton Gregory.
Thank you. Just kind of a brief reiteration of where I was at. There are a lot of big line items in here. I've looked over them. I actually don't have a whole lot of heartache about any of these, but I will be voting yes in the first reading. And although it is not the most lively reading, I would encourage any member of the public to peruse these 16 items and to either send us an email, or if they're so inclined to take time later in the month at the public hearing to come before us and give us their 2 cents on it. Thanks.
Any other discussion on the main motion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
yes,
David, Chelsea.
Yes.
Thank you. Thomas,
No.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Okay, so item, I believe it's 2022-14. I might have the number wrong, but it's 2022-15, I guess, for an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2023 budget for known changes. First reading, second reading will be in 2 weeks, along with a public hearing. So that passes with a 6-1 vote with Member Fine Walsh opposed. Okay, item B, we have a topic in front of us today, top Petersburg Borough projects for 2023. Manager Giesbrecht requests approval of the 2023 top borough project list. Once finalized and approved, this will be provided to our federal lobbyist. I'd entertain a motion to approve this list.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by member Lynn, seconded by member Kinsinger. Discussion. Seeing none. Member Kinsinger.
Yes, no, I agree with how we've rated these projects. I think this is what we've talked about all these at length at past meetings. And I think we should move ahead with how they're listed.
I think just to clarify that, I don't believe these are prioritized, are they, Manager Giesbrecht?
They're not prioritized like 1 through 5 or anything, but these would be the top priorities that we would send to our federal delegation.
Top 7.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, they don't ask for them to be prioritized beyond that.
Okay, any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea,
yes,
Thomas,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Bob, Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Okay, the priority list has been approved with unanimous vote, so we'll send that off to our federal lobbyists. Next item, C, letter to the Wrangell Borough Assembly regarding the Inter-Island Ferry Authority, IFA. Assembly members Kinsinger and Mucci request approval of this letter inquiring whether the Wrangell Assembly would be interested in joining the Petersburg Assembly in discussions regarding funding for the IFA. I'd entertain a motion to approve this letter.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Kinsinger. Discussion. I think member Kinsinger.
Yes, this is kind of a response, a request, Governor, past Governor and Senator Frank Murkowski came to town. And he spent a discussion with Ron Curtis, who's the executive director of IFA. And I've also talked to Ron quite at length. And basically all this is, we're asking is to send a letter to Wrangell to see if they're interested in opening up a discussion to see if there's some way that we could bring the second IFA ferry to South Mickoff Island. Originally envisioned 3 days a week, primarily in the summer months. The idea would be having a ferry that go from Hollis to Wrangell to South Mickoff to Hollis. Nothing set in stone there. Past history, Petersburg was involved in the inception and the development of IFA. And then when it became evident that it was not going to be practical to run that northern run, Wrangell and Petersburg withdrew from IFA, and it's strictly been a Hollis to Ketchikan operation. Right now, there is in the federal budget, in the transportation, the infrastructure bill, quite a bit of operations money. And that legislation was crafted pretty much so that it would just work here in Alaska. Although that money is available nationwide to any other ferry systems. It has a revision in there of 50 miles. And what we're looking at is seeing if that route would qualify for operations money. So if that's possible, it is a window of opportunity to start that run up again and see if we can try and generate some connections between us, Wrangell, and POW Island.
Any other discussion on the discussion with Wrangell? Member Fine Walsh.
I guess direct this to member Kinsinger. What would connecting to Wrangell connect us to a larger web of other connections, or create like a small localized one, or kind of why Wrangell, just because they're closer or because of existing relationships with IFA?
Basically, the only entity in Southeast Alaska that's got much of a ferry fleet is IFA. They have 2 vessels. The state fleet's kind of anemic right now. And the idea is, and particularly at the state, and who knows what the state's going to do. If they continue operating down the Prince Rupert, there's a pretty strong demand for people wanting to come to this portion of Southeast Alaska, utilizing the Rupert connection going to PFW, and then hopefully Petersburg and Wrangell. So for this to succeed, it would also require that the state have a minimal level of service in and out of Prince Rupert. In absence of the state service, no, this would fail because nobody could get here. So that's always the question. The hope is that the state will, the money's there, whether they can get organized enough to build new vessels and modernize their fleet or not, that's another question.
Member Lynn.
Thank you. A follow-up question, Member Kensinger. That money that was put in the infrastructure bill is for the ferry system. That's also the same money that's our current ferry system is using. So if we were to push this, that would take money away from where we're at? In other words, what's the trade-off we're looking at here is my question.
Well, a correction, no, that money wasn't specifically put in there for our ferry system. It was put in for ferry operations in the entirety of the United States. But they put in a rule in there that said any routes under 50 miles do not qualify. So really, realistically, the only other place in the United States that could potentially have routes that are over 50 miles are Hawaii. They have had several plans, and they even had a vessel, a high-speed vessel purchased quite a few years ago, and we're starting up an inter-island ferry system in Hawaii, but that failed. And there's been discussion that they might start it up again. So no, it's not just for the Alaska Marine Highway System, but that legislation was pretty much designed by Senator Murkowski for the Alaska Marine Highway System. For this to really work long-term, it has to pretty much pay for itself. That's how IFA operates. They don't pay for themselves 100%. You know, the numbers go up and down. COVID had a big impact upon their system. So they have a couple issues that they're dealing with that this run could help alleviate. One, they have two vessels, because you got to have two vessels if you have a ferry route, because things break down, you have to service them. So if they could utilize that second vessel that they're paying insurance on and basically in ready reserve, that would help them in their operations. They're also looking at purchasing another vessel in the future. So there's a possibility to expand. You know, the IFA vessel is 20 years old now. In most ferry systems, 25 years is when you replace your vessels at. Alaska Marine Highway, of course, being the exception. So that would help them in that way. But for this to work, it would require a little bit of startup money. Just like when you start up any business, you have to have a little bit of seed money to see if it's going to work or not. I'm not proposing that we use general fund dollars from the city of Petersburg to make this happen. But it will require some participation from us to make this work. So this is just an exploration at this point, I guess. Simple way to put it.
Member Mucci.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I wanted to thank Member Kensinger for inviting Governor Murkowski into town. It was really good to see him. I hadn't heard from him for years, and it's really cool that he has so much passion and commitment to Alaska, and especially Southeast Alaska. He was going to be giving the same type of presentation to the Wrangell Assembly. I think it was next week, and I think, you know, he might be involved in this future discussion about moving this stuff forward. And it was good to see him and his passion for the ferry system. And I think it's just a starting point. I think it'd be a great deal. I think a lot of us rode that ferry back and forth to Wrangell from time to time and down to Prince of Wales. And it's pretty interesting, the concept of it. So I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully Wrangell will be receptive to this letter. So yeah, I just want to say I'm going to support this, and I think it's a great idea.
First, Stan Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting yes on this, largely because I don't see any downside to having some dialogue with our neighbors in Wrangell regarding this topic. That said, I am cautiously pessimistic about the financial viability of the IFA. History has shown it was not a solvent operation. That said, again, collaborating with Wrangell to maybe find a way to help it be a functional system that can pay for itself. I see no downside in having that dialogue. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Yeah, I feel the same way. Member Stanton Gregory does, so I see nothing wrong with starting the discussion, but whether it'll turn out to be a viable ferry system when it didn't pan out in the past, but everything's worth looking into, so I will be supporting this letter to the Wrangell Assembly as well. If there's no other comments, will the clerk please call the roll?
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes,
Okay, we will send the letter to Wrangell and then maybe we'll have a discussion in the near future. Item D, approval of election officials for October 4th, 2022. Clerk Thompson requests Assembly approval of the following Petersburg residents to serve as election officials for our October 4th, 2022 municipal election. There are 17 of them, so I'm not going to list the names, but they're listed on the agenda. So I would entertain a motion to approve Clerk Thompson's request.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Stanton Gregory, seconded by Member Mucci. Any discussion? Member Stanton Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief thank you to those individuals who have agreed to be a part of helping the election. Thank you so much.
Ditto. So with that being said, would the clerk please call the roll?
Thomas,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff, Bob,
yes,
David,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes. Okay, so they are approved. Next item E, invitation to Alaska Representative Mary Peltola. Assembly Member Mucci requests a draft letter to Representative Peltola inviting her to visit Petersburg. I'd entertain a motion to approve that letter.
So moved.
second,
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lim. Any discussion? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to thank the Deputy City Clerk for helping me put this letter together. It was, this stuff is my idea, but I think this is a great letter that we need to send to her and at least invite her to Petersburg. I know she got a big round of applause down at Southeast Conference here about a month or so ago, and there's lots of stuff going on in Petersburg, and there's lots of stuff in infrastructure being talked about, and I think the more welcome we are to our new representative, the better. So, yep, that's why it's here, and I'll be supporting it.
Any other discussion on this letter to invite Congressman Peltola? Seeing none, the clerk call the roll.
Bob,
yes,
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes. Okay, the letter will be sent off. Next item F, Housing Task Force appointments. The Assembly will appoint interested individuals to a new Housing Task Force and choose one of the appointed individuals to act as facilitator of the task force. Letters of interest to serve on the task force have been received from 13 individuals, so I will not name them as well. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the total group, and then we could go forward from there and pick who we would request as a facilitator.
So moved.
second,
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. So on the group of people, if no one has any comments on the group, would the clerk call the roll on the group, and then we'll go forward with the facilitator?
Can I add something on there?
Sure.
I suppose I'd like to make an amendment to this. This is on me. I'd hope to put my name in on the Housing Task Force, but I freely admit I forgot to turn my letter. Would it be possible to make an amendment to add J. Stanton Gregory to that?
Second that.
Is that okay to go about it that way?
Motion's been made in a second, so.
Thank you.
I see nothing wrong with adding more names to this type of a list. So I'll just call the clerk call the roll on the amendment.
thank you. Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay, Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Bob,
yes,
Okay, we've added one name to the list, so there now are 14. So now I'll entertain a motion to approve the 14 names that are on the list. And I guess we'll just call the roll
yes.
to approve.
Jeff, Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
yes,
David,
Yes.
Okay, we have 14 names approved. Now, would anybody like to make a motion to, put someone's name forward to be the facilitator?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to make J. Stan Gregor the facilitator.
Second to that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion. We have to have discussions on every motion.
I think it's a good idea.
But
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to know if Jay's willing to do this.
That's the,
Last guy to the meeting in charge. How does that fit?
Stanton Gregor.
yeah, I was just processing that myself. Obviously, that's, Member Lynn tossed me off my horse a little bit. If it's the will of the assembly, sure. I think it's, I mean, the task force is critically important. These are really invested people. If that's what the assembly wants, I'd be glad to. That wasn't what I was thinking, but I can roll with that. I don't mind facilitating. If that's the will of the assembly.
Any other discussion on appointing member Stanton Gregor to be the facilitator? And basically, my take on that would be he would just run the meetings.
Aye.
So I don't see anything wrong with that personally. If there's no other discussion on appointing member Stanton Gregor to be the facilitator to the Housing Task Force, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Bob,
Yes,
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Chelsea,
yes,
David,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a Housing Task Force appointed. Wonderful. Item G, certification of October 4th, tomorrow, 2022 municipal election. Clerk Thompson requests the assembly choose a date and time for the certification of the October 4th municipal election. Certification must take place by the end of the day, Tuesday, October 11th. And just in some discussion before the meeting, it sounds like a few assembly members will be out of town. I'll entertain a motion to have someone pick a day. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we have a meeting on October 7th, which is this coming Friday, to certify the election.
You had a time to that, Member Mucci?
I was
Please.
just gonna depend on staff to tell me what would be a good time before is noon?
Noon's good with me if it's good with everyone else.
is there a way we
I'll
could
be
do
on a-
morning, say 9?
Pardon me, Member Tremblay, you're kind of faint.
Here, I'll turn her up a little.
Okay, thank you, Clerk Thompson. What was your input there, Member Tremblay?
Thank you. I was hoping for morning if we're doing it on a weekday, just for work schedule, before 10 o'clock preferably, but open to the will of the assembly.
Member Stanton Gregor.
Yeah, morning works better if we do choose it on the 7th, because I'll be on a plane by about noon Alaska time, but morning, 9 a.m. would be, I could zoom in for that or call in, whatever needs to play out.
Does that work for the administration?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we have a time of 9 a.m. October 7th to have a meeting to certify the election from tomorrow. Will clerk call the roll?
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
yes,
Mark,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes,
Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, that will be the day, October 7th, 9 a.m. And I will do my best to call in from the vote. Communications, we have correspondence received since September 15th. It's listed on the agenda. It is also on the borough's website, and we do not make a habit of reading all those communications, so they're available if anybody is interested. Next item, 18. Assembly discussion items, Borough Emergency Preparedness. Assembly Member Mucci would like to discuss who handles the borough's emergency preparedness. how it works and how we would incorporate our planning with the school district's plans, the medical center's plans, and other organizations / businesses in town. So Member Mucci, you put this forward, you have the floor.
Sure, thank you very much. Yeah, I've been to a couple of meetings over the last month and a half regarding emergency preparedness up at the school, and I know we were kind of on the interim for a department head with the fire department, and I was just curious how emergency preparedness is handled within the borough. I know the chief was there for a while, and is there, if we don't have a department head in place, is there a chain of command that somebody below the department head would attend a meeting like that so that the borough's plans, so that whether it's the school district plan or the medical center's plan are all under the umbrella of the borough? Or I'm a little unclear on how the system works.
Manager Giesbrecht, we had this discussion. Could you
Thank you.
clarify?
Sure. So I'll start off talking about how it's set up and then try to remember to get to your question. So each entity is responsible for its own emergency preparedness. So the hospital, school, the borough, we have our own plans for things that we can anticipate and, have expectations of we should be able to handle. So for example, if we have a landslide or something like that, we're not going to ask the school to come coordinate with that. That's on the borough. The borough has the ultimate authority for the whole organization, so to speak. And that's coordinated through the local emergency planning committee with the LEPC. So school, the hospital, the borough, all and others in town have representatives that sit on that committee. And then that committee works with similar agencies at the regional and state level. And then the state works with the feds as needed. So our fire EMS director is our emergency manager. And in Sandy's absence, that falls to me if there was any kind of a big emergency that happened. Luckily it did not. And Aaron's first day on the job is today. So it's one of his big priorities is to get up to speed on emergency management. Generally in the past, Sandy basically was the spearhead behind our local LEPC, and Aaron will fill that role. One of the big issues is what we call it's called in our plan, in our ordinances, it's called the disaster response plan. It's really an emergency preparedness plan, which is kind of the more common knowledge or common nomenclature name for it. It's the one that we have is very old. It goes back to the city of Petersburg. It definitely needs to be updated. It doesn't have anything in there about how to handle pandemics. It was actually written prior to 9/11. So a lot of things have changed since then. This will be one of Aaron's first jobs. I talked to him this morning about, gave him a hard copy. We don't even know if there's an electronic version of this around. So he's going to start working on trying to find out. And then putting that together will be part of the work that happens with the LEPC when we get that far. Just a heads up, it's also related to the ordinance that the assembly adopted that caused so much heartburn here in town. So my guess is there'll be a lot of feedback when we get that far from folks that don't necessarily want us to have an emergency plan. So anyway, but it's on Aaron's plate as the department head, and he's going to get started on it. And we'll in the meantime, the state's been notified that he's on board, and I told them don't pester him till the middle of October, but he'll be invited to some of their regional and state level planning meetings for emergency management, and go from there.
That's great. Yep.
Questions?
Thank you very much.
Any other discussion of any other assembly members have any input? Okay, seeing none. Item B, columbarium cover. Assembly member Mucci requests this discussion item. Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was requested to bring this to the assembly. I didn't even know this was up at the cemetery until I drove up to it last week, and it's a place where I guess you can intern loved ones up there and come up and contemplate what goes on, or just contemplate stuff up there. And somebody mentioned to me that there was some planning probably 5 to 10 years ago about putting a cover over it and possibly some seats that people could reflect on if they were up there. And I was just curious how we find out more information about making something that, bringing some more information back to the assembly so we could have a better idea of what it would cost to do something like that. And I understand that the cemetery is under Parks and Recreations. And I briefly chatted with Stephanie over the last week, and I don't know how to bring this forward and get more information. So that's my process here.
Member
Sure.
Giesbrecht, do you have any? input?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a project that's on any of our lists, but doesn't mean we can't try to find out information. So it'll not take a huge high priority, but I'll ask Stephanie and her crew to at least see, what pricing would look like. And then we have to move back to the assembly for some kind of funding. It would be helpful to know exactly, are they talking about a cover? I mean, anyway, getting more information on that. So maybe it's a conversation between you and Stephanie, or whoever's talking to you to see Stephanie.
Yep.
So is it a cover over the columbarium? Is it a cover for someplace for people to sit, which is separate than the columbarium? Just knowing what those details would help Stephanie out to try to figure out what you're asking for.
Member Mucci.
Yes, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. I imagine that former Assembly Member Paul Anderson might have some information regarding it, because I know he was looking into those kind of things many years ago. And he might be a resource to reach out to and stuff. But thank you very much.
Okay, any other assembly members have any input on this discussion? Okay, seeing no interest, move to item C, THRHA Partnership on Moderate Income Housing. Assembly Member Mucci requests this discussion item.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was, between this meeting and last, I was looking over the Southeast Conference annual meeting notes that we got from Director Cabrera on the 19th of September. And there was a paragraph towards the end about the Clinton-Haida Regional Housing Authority and how they were working with the Borough of Juneau about providing low and moderate income housing. And I just wanted to double check to make sure that that door is still open with Clinton-Haida within the borough, so that if they're obviously doing it in Juneau, which is obviously a bigger community than ours, but maybe there's a way to keep that door open and see what we can do to possibly continue that relationship with Clinton-Haida. So,
Member Giesbrecht, can you explain your relationship with
Sure.
Clinton-Haida?
Clinton-Haida Housing and I, or their CEO and I, have periodic phone conversations. So she called me a couple of weeks ago, in fact. They're applying for another grant that would potentially be available to be used for housing here in Petersburg. She wants some information for me. So the assembly's actions are actually really helpful on having P&D do those analysis. I sent her what has currently been done and told her that the rest of it could potentially be done by mid-October. Their grants due by the end of October. So spoke to Jacqueline, and we agreed a while back just to keep in touch with each other. So, every couple of weeks, every month or so, one of us will call the other and has anything changed? So this was good news. I think this is a really good topic for the housing task force. I mean, because no matter what, if this gets done and there's money there, how that money is used and what comes back to the assembly, or even in the future, is going to be an important part of what we can do. But yeah, no, we agreed to informally discuss things with each other with the hope that, at some point something would break loose and we'd have money. So
great, thank you.
Sounds like the borough has been keeping in touch
yes, sir.
through you with Clinton-Haida. Any other input on that discussion item from assembly members? Okay, seeing none, that brings us to item D, assembly member comments. Any assembly members have comments today? Sunny, weather's nice, nothing? Okay.
I do have one, Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank the police department officers, Wolf and Sergeant Harris, members of the Petersburg School District and Petersburg Medical Center, Julie Walker and Becky Turland, who have been putting on ALICE training within the community. They've had it like in Steve's report about at the high school, middle school, and I participated in one in the elementary school here last week. And I think they have plans for more of these ALICE trainings at the medical center and here at the borough. And while it's an uncomfortable topic to talk about, it's it's very worthwhile training, not just for within the school district or the hospital or the borough, but I think it's good information and things to learn about when you're in a situation that you're not quite sure how things are going, if things go crazy. It was really worthwhile. And I just wanted to thank everybody who was involved in putting the training together. Thank you.
Any other assembly members have comments today? Okay, that moves us to item E, recognitions. Anybody have any recognitions? Member Stantengreiger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief one for our local United States Forest Service. I try to get up Ravens Trail several times a week. I think it's phenomenal. And, you know, anyone who's been up there know it's pretty rigorous. I was up there the other day and I was crested the hill to the cabin. I saw this critter on the porch and I said to myself, man, nice marmot. And then I thought to myself, holy cow, the gravity of what went into making that cabin and trail come together, from the low area gravel work to the boardwalk and rock work, to the metal stairs, to the concrete stairs, to the cabin site itself, complete with dock and metal benches. It's a huge thank you to our local Forest Service, the federal dollars involved, and specifically to our trails guy, Paul Olson, his crew and the engineers. It is one of the most user-friendly trails you could ask for, and it comes with a phenomenal view when you get to the top. So just a huge shout out to them.
Okay, any other recognitions by some members? Member Kinsinger.
Yes, I'd like to, if you're listening on the radio right now, it's provided by KFSK. And I'd like to thank them for their many years of service to the borough by providing this service and getting out the numerous public service announcements, emergency announcements. The list goes on. And just remind everybody it's their fundraiser week this week. If you feel so inclined, call them up and give them some money.
Okay, any other recognitions by assembly members? Any staff have recognition of any employees or? Seeing none? Entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.